All right, let's start with a big question. What if your intelligence isn't this fixed thing you're born with, but something you can actually build? We're going to dive into this idea that your mind is an architecture, a structure you can consciously design. So let's get right into the blueprint.
So let me ask you this. Ever feel like your brain's running on an old, clunky operating system? Stuck on autopilot, waiting for an upgrade that just never seems to come? If that sounds familiar, you're definitely not alone. And honestly, it's the first big sign that it might be time for a mental reboot.
To pull that off, we kind of have to flip the script on what we think intelligence really is. See, we're taught that being smart is all about memorizing facts and having those super quick answers, right? But the real path to cognitive growth? It's about learning to enjoy a little mental friction. It's about embracing uncertainty. And trust me, this one shift changes everything.
Okay, so let's get into our first section, your brain's old OS. We're going to look at how we move beyond that autopilot thinking and why we get stuck there without even realizing it in the first place.
Here's the core misconception that holds so many of us back. It's this belief that intelligence is basically a fixed lottery ticket. You either got a winning number when you were born or you didn't. And that one single idea, it stops people from even trying to grow. But what psychology shows us is that it's just not true.
And that brings us to the central idea for today. Intelligence isn't just a test score. It's an architecture you can actually build from the ground up. Think about that for a second. Your mind isn't static. It's this dynamic structure, and you are the architect. You can design and build a stronger cognitive framework. So let's start with that foundation.
All right, section 2, the mind's hidden anchors. Because, before we can build anything new, we got to identify what's holding us back.
Okay, it all starts with this concept from psychology called the cognitive miser. And it's pretty simple, really. Our brains are hardwired for efficiency. They want to conserve energy by taking the path of least resistance. The easy way out. Now, that was great for survival back in the day, but today, that tendency to avoid effort is the very thing that stops our minds from growing.
And here they are, the modern culprits that totally exploit that tendency. See, thanks to something called neuroplasticity, our daily habits are literally rewiring our brains. So when we're endlessly scrolling, we're fragmenting our attention. When we're constantly asking our phones or AI for answers, we're offloading the actual work of thinking. And when we choose simple, easy content over complex ideas, well, we're training our brains to avoid the very struggle that builds cognitive muscle.
Okay, enough about the problems, right? Let's get to the solution. Section 3 is all about building your cognitive architecture. This is the blueprint for upgrading your mind.
So, the blueprint is basically a 3-step process. Pretty straightforward. Step 1. Clear the anchors. That means consciously ditching those habits like mindless scrolling. Step 2. Install new hardware by actively leaning into difficult tasks. And step 3. Ask better questions. This means shifting from just seeking simple answers to actually questioning our own assumptions.
So what do we mean by new hardware? Well, it's not about buying a new device, that's for sure. It's about physically building new, stronger neural pathways by embracing what we can call productive struggle. Things like deep reading, really reading, not just scanning, that trains your brain to hold multiple complex ideas at once. Or learning a new language, or even coding. These things force your mind to build brand new pathways. It's basically the cognitive equivalent of heavy lifting at the gym.
Next up, section 4, the view from the top. Once that foundation is laid and the new hardware is installed, you can start to access the highest level of thinking. And the pinnacle of this entire architecture is a concept called metacognition. It literally just means thinking about thinking. It is the absolute game-changing ability to step outside of your own mind, observe your own thought processes, and analyze how you think.
The shift this creates is, well, it's profound. With metacognition, you're no longer just a participant in your own mind, being swept away by your thoughts. You become the architect. You're in the driver's seat, consciously designing your mental world.
So what does this look like in practice? Well, it means you're actively studying your own thought patterns and biases. It means developing real intellectual humility, that understanding that you don't know everything. And crucially, it means being totally okay with admitting when you're wrong. Because suddenly, the goal isn't to be right, it's to get closer to the truth. You want a simple way to practice this? At the end of the day, just ask yourself, what's one thing I believe today that I might be wrong about?
And this is a really crucial warning. Let's talk about the surprising feel of growth. Because leveling up your mind doesn't actually feel the way you probably expect. In fact, most of the time it just feels like friction.
We all kind of expect that getting smarter will feel like, instant clarity and making faster decisions. But the reality? It's often the complete opposite. You might actually experience more mental friction. You might find yourself taking longer to make decisions, and you'll probably get really, really annoyed with the kind of oversimplified black and white advice that you used to find kind of satisfying.
Just think about it for a second. The reason you're taking longer to make a decision isn't because you're getting slower. No way. It's because your upgraded brain is now capable of seeing more nuance, analyzing more variables, and considering way more potential outcomes. You're not slower, you're more precise.
And this right here might be the most important takeaway of the whole thing. That feeling of friction, it isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. Willing to embrace the discomfort that comes with it. Can you handle the friction of a mind that is actively growing? That is the real test.